Welcome back, Middle Earth fans, to Into the West. Last week we had a reveal of a new edition coming along with Rise of Angmar, and this week we got a whole bunch of news and details on the new edition. So we're here to break it down. Before we get started, I just want to do a quick shout out of the sponsor of the video, Baron of Dice. They make some great Middle Earth SBG dice as well as dice for many other games. Go check out their products on their website. You can use our promo code WEST for 5% off your order. And also want to thank Mithril Brush Painting Competition for sponsoring this video. If you want more information on the competition, as well as how to enter and how to support the competition, just check out the link below. Also want to say that we're doing a Patreon promotion where after 1 month of signing up, we will be sending out one pack of dice.
Custom Into the West dice.
Yes. Also, a quick thank you to all of our patrons over on Patreon for supporting us. If you want to see extra content, see videos early, and other perks, please check out all of the perks in the link below. A special shout out to Ragin Ridge 83, the top supporter of the channel. Without going into details and specifics, what are your guys' thoughts overall after reading today's news? Good, bad, mixed?
Seriously, Games Workshop has no chill. Like we don't hear from them for a good year, 2 years, and then suddenly they drop this on us 2 weeks in a row.
This is a lot to take in.
Remember the good old days of 7 days ago when there was so much excitement and everybody was like hype? It was great. That was awesome. It's a good 7 days.
I just was surprised at the amount of things they're announcing because just looking back at previous editions, usually not that much changes from edition to edition. I think this is by far going to be the most changes.
I just before going forward with it, I do really like their transparency with this. I wasn't really into it that competitively in the previous edition, but they're giving us a lot of heads up and a lot of details going into it, which I think seems to be a good thing.
Yeah, that is nice. And the fact that they're being so open about how long the actual Angmar book is going to last, that's nice. Or are we just going to walk through the article actually and then do it bit by bit? Okay, then I won't.
Yeah, we're going to get into the details now. So, all right, so this is the article that was released today. The road goes ever on and on. So we have the next edition. Basically, it's coming with War of the Rohirrim movie that we heard about. That's coming out in December this year. And this won't go into all the details, but you'll get a taster in this article. So it's important to point out that, the designer, Jay, says that the new edition will play like the game we all know and love. So the core rules are mostly staying the same. However, there's always room for improvement, and they believe this is going to be the best edition of MESBG.
Can you just imagine if the advertisement is we're not sure if it'll be better than this edition, but we're coming out with another one anyway.
Fuck it, bro. Let's go.
So the first thing that's going to be changed is in the way. So there used to be an in the way chart where hedges will be like a 3+ in the way, and then battlements on a castle would be like 5+, but they're streamlining it all into the 4+. And then they're removing special strikes from the game.
Like the in the way thing, he could go either way. It's nice having more variety in it. Most things were people would say is a 4+ anyway, except for light fences and small things. So I don't think it's gonna have that much of a change on gameplay, but it's more dynamic and fortifications are different from a flimsy little fence,
Yeah.
But whatever, sure, that's not a big deal.
A lot of the times when it isn't a 4+, I have to remind my opponent. So I think this is just to simplify it so that people don't kind of spend time looking up, finding that chart, and then it not being a significant difference. I get the change, but I do like that variety as well. Knowing that chart kind of can give you advantages in a game over an opponent because certain in the ways are not 4+, and you can take advantage of that occasionally.
Yeah. That being said, though, things that were a 5+, huge advantage. You had a board that had a lot of purpose-built fortifications on it, or trying to play a siege, when it's a 5+ even in combat to get past, that sucks.
Yeah.
So It's
I
kind of like,
the issue with this is that because it's so rare, I don't really see people like discussing it before like a tournament game. Maybe like it happens when the shooting happens, and then of course then it becomes kind of almost, I wouldn't say an argument, but it kind of comes down to like who, I don't know, does argue it better in a sense, right? And it will come out to an advantage to one person if you can't fully decide. Like it's like, okay, this is a sturdy looking fence, right? And it's a fence, so it's a 3+1. One side is arguing, but the other side is like, but hey, look, this is like, pretty filled in fence, so it should be a 4 up. And then it's obviously going to benefit one side, especially if it's like a really, really heavy shooting force. So I mean, I get the change. 95% of the time it's going to be 4+ anyway. So yeah, I think it's a good thing.
All right. Thoughts on removing special strikes?
I mean, where do you even begin?
brother.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
just
go
get
ahead.
good. Get good. Like that's the only argument I've heard against special strikes.
Yeah.
It's so hard to learn. It slows down the game. Models die faster. It speeds up the game.
Yeah, there's a huge gap here from what I've seen in some of the discussions just on the first day of release. It seems like two separate crowds, right? Like the more casual crowd just say, it's too confusing. I pretty much just ignore it anyway, or I forget to use it. So I'm glad it's gone. The other side, it's like, hey, it actually matters in the games. So like it's pretty important and it's pretty nice to have it. I wish that they had made changes to it rather than just removing it straight up. I'm always an advocate of more decision making and more tactical play. So I think one of my most hated special strike is fainting, right? Because pretty much all the time, whenever you feint, it's always no downside, only upside. So it is a pure memorization thing. Like you have two elves in a fight, you just have to remember to feint with one of them. But the issue with like piercing or like bashing, like those ones, especially bashing could be used more, I would say, but they add a little bit more tactical play and depth to combats. So that's something that I wish they could have like maybe revised or like, made something more like that.
Mhm. Special strikes can differentiate for profiles as well. So, for example, in Isengard, the Wargrider and the Dunlending Horseman, almost the same. Like the difference is like one is on a worgen, one has more courage. What made them even more different profiles was that the Dunlending Horseman had an axe and could strength 4 pierce, and so you're kind of all of a sudden. I think some of the warrior profiles will just seem a lot more similar.
Okay. My counter, and I fully think this is a bad change, just for the record. They should keep the strikes in. However, so before the special strikes were introduced, and part of the reason they were introduced is because you used to get two battle lines that were usually D6 and they'd go like this. And then nothing would happen. Whoever rolled more sixes would win. So then adding in the special strikes helped change that. Currently, like right now in this rule set, with all the releases up to this date, excluding the Angmar stuff, there's a lot more strength 4 included than like 10 years ago when the initial special strikes were introduced and we used to get a lot of that. So because of that, you get a lot less of lines just hitting and nothing happening. I still think it's better that the special strikes are in the game. I still think it's not that hard. It improves gameplay. Hopefully some of those buffs end up getting included into certain profiles in the new edition, or maybe there'll be more hero buffs, like within X amount of inches, you reroll ones, or like Thorin's special rule where you get +1 strength for like a turn or something like that. Just something to help offset the fact that you're not going to have the ability to do this extra damage. We'll see. It's early days yet. I hope the game doesn't get super grindy again.
Yeah. I know the main argument for removing it is that, be more casual players, it complicates the game for them. But from what I've seen, from what I've experienced, the newer players, they just ignore them. It doesn't make it harder for them because it's the person that's using them that has to remember the special strikes. So I don't know if I agree with that argument for why
Yeah.
they should be removed.
I don't love using like a skill issue thing, but it's like if you're learning the game, it's the small rules. It's not going to make like a huge difference. So you can ignore that until you like learn the basic mechanics, get everything down. And then when you want to like get into the game in more depth, then you add that in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you can really fine tune, right?
And to be fair, 90% of the special strikes are fainting and piercing, and it's not too hard to work out like when you need to do those the majority of the time. It's not like a crazy math equation you have to figure out every time. It's a simple formula that once you like kind of roughly calculate, you basically rinse and repeat the rest of your the rest of your combats.
It was nice that it kind of was a small reward for people who were maybe a little more competitive or know the rules well.
But I just want to add this in before we move on. I think compared to the other upcoming decisions that they're talking about, like I don't think this will make or break the game, even though I think we slightly disagree with this change. I don't think it'll necessarily have an impact on whether the next edition is better or worse than the current one. Okay, maybe Ian disagrees because he loves special strikes, but
Okay, so speaking of bigger changes, there will be a greater focus on narrative armies than before, especially in match play. The game is centered around key storylines of the movies and the books. Every profile in the game will be split into a series of army lists, and they are designed to focus on a particular scene, battle, or group of characters from the movies or books. And each of them will have flavorful special rules. So basically, to recreate iconic scenes in match play. This to me sounds like they're going to get rid of armies and just under each profile say what lists they can be in. So to me, this sounds more in the Legendary Legion direction and just like more restrictive and focused on narrative and theme.
I know we didn't bet on this, but I still kind of feel like I owe you money, Charles, because you fucking called this so many times.
I think my prediction was that they were going to get rid of the Alliance Matrix and you would either have to play a Legion or Pure. This is not exactly that, but it's a similar idea, I think.
I think this makes me really, really nervous. As much as we love like the additions of the Legendary Legions in this edition when they started coming out, that was in addition to the already fully fleshed out armies that we could play with the Alliance Matrix. And it just seems like it gave us a lot of options. I understand there's a lot of people who agree with this and are excited for it. It's always great to see a narrative army on the tabletop, but I think it's just from my experience over the last edition is that list building legendary legions, there's only so much you can do. Off the top of my head, like there's only a few legendary legions that actually have like some decision making and list building, I would say, like or really big decision making rather than just swapping a model or two, right? Assault on Lothlorien, maybe like Defenders of Helm's Deep, like which heroes to take. Otherwise, like after a little while, the competitive scene kind of figures out, hey, this is the way to build this legendary legion. And if you're not doing that, you're not doing it right. So that's what I'm worried about because even if there are a ton of these army lists, like there's just not much creativity in list building, right? It's more of a decision which legendary legion do I play? But then once you select that, like there's only a cookie cutter way to build it.
I have heard people saying that they might revert it to the way the old Legions of Middle Earth book worked, which is like, God, I don't know, like 15 years ago, something like that. Everything would be laid out on a page, kind of similar to a Legendary Legion. And then kind of, I think, if I remember correctly, at the bottom, there was like a list of things that like it could ally with, but it'd be like more region specific. So if it's like that, and there is like kind of like an alliances you can do with the different factions, I guess I'm okay with that. That's not too different from how we have it now, I guess. How is that easier than just having the alliance matrix, though? You just
But
look at a little graph and you can go, oh, this is good with this. Whereas with that, it's just like a block of text and you have to read through every single. I don't know. I don't get it. I
Maybe
don't get it.
maybe it's, I guess, a cleaner way to get rid of yellow and red, because if they do it how you do it and they just list what you can ally, then that's essentially just green allies, right?
I'm assuming they're doing away with army bonuses then too. I don't know. I kind of like that in this edition, but
What I have a little bit of trouble understanding is they're trying to make match play more narrative, but in the current edition, in the rules, it splits narrative play and match play as like different, they're different modes of the game, right? So if you're making match play, like trying to make it like narrative play, then they're not as different. I think this decision was made for the majority. Majority of the players aren't super competitive and they're not thinking about optimizing lists and they just want to play a pure army. And for them, this probably isn't a big change. And maybe that's why they went this way. But
fair enough. Maybe not everybody likes to do like the min maxing thing. But like part of the army building thing too is just having the option to be like, I don't know, what if I want to run a list and be like, oh, what if Boromir survived and he made it to Helm's Deep? What if I want to run that in like a game? You kind of have the option now with the way everything's set up. You can experiment, you can do things, you can come up with your own lore for things and like play that in a competitive game or a setting, right? You won't have that option anymore. I don't understand how taking away choice for people is a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm really struggling with that.
Charles obviously like thought this was like would work decently, but a couple of years when we went to the Nova Open, he did take King Elisar and Boromir, the Captain of the White Tower, when it was legal. And yeah, you can argue, oh, that's not super thematic, but he was going for like what if, huge what if. And he like with that in mind, he built full on like, seventh tier of Minas Tirith and transported across the continent, right? So like he was there to build a thematic force, and he won like best army, best display, and whatever, right? So yeah, that's kind of limiting on that hobby front too.
with this sort of description, I'm expecting a lot more armies to feel like the Helm Legion. So, like, imagine if Spider Queen, you can only play in Dark Denizens. Like, you can only take spiders and bats. And certain
Yeah.
models that we see all the time, they're only able to take their normal profiles in their army because in the book or in the movie, they weren't seen fighting anyone else.
Yeah, and that's what I was just speaking on, and like I was just afraid of, because like on our Discord and also the public Discords as well, like I would say like a majority of the conversation revolves around people just making these hypothetical lists all day. That's one of the most fun things you could do in MESBG, and you don't see a lot of helm lists being thrown in there. Let's just say that.
But it's not like people who wanted to play strictly only themed things were struggling, right? It's not like that was a
No,
hard thing to do. Like
no.
Legions became some of the best lists in the game, and they're super themey. So I don't know. The system now is good. It was working. Why
And
would you fuck it up?
And Ian, like you said earlier, it's always good to have choice. Like I've seen certain TOs in Facebook groups do events where only Legendary Legion and Pure was allowed. Like that's themey. Every single person attending will have a themey army. So it gives you that option to do that if you want currently.
Okay,
Um,
so before we get too down, let's move on to the next little bit, which might give us a little bit of a glimmer of hope.
Basically,
The
Jay says
sky
this
is
is
falling. I can see it outside.
so basically Jay says this is basically one step further from Legendary Legions, which proved to be wildly popular. Armies will be represented in the same manner as legions. He says there will be loads of these to choose from, and they've taken great care to make sure if there's a scene in the movie showcasing characters fighting alongside one another, then there is an army list to represent that on the tabletop. So there will be no trouble recreating any movie scene. For players that like to find the most potent combinations, fear not. Many army lists will still provide opportunity for you to try your combination to see what you can come up with.
So far, Jay has shown that we can trust him as a rules writer, so I'm just holding on that, of course, like I think having themed options are great and all, but I think what we're most concerned about is just taking away the ability to do some more creative things. So if the choices are still there, then I have high hopes.
Yeah, it doesn't go into detail how far these combinations will go.
This sentence is so vague. It like 100% it was just put there to calm down people like us.
Yeah. It can't
Doesn't
be as open it is now because otherwise it wouldn't say that, it's moving towards theme, right? So it's going to be more restrictive than it is now. It's
but
just how restrictive.
it's not even that open now though. Like what with like the whole Valor thing, like you have to have a hero of Valor. There's already like the Alliance Matrix.
But at least you still had convenient alliances, which it doesn't
Yeah.
sound like that's going to be a thing. As part of the greater focus on narrative, every profile has been reworked and many characters have received updated or new abilities, special rules. It goes down a little bit. Let me just go. Yeah, so here. So basically, thematic special rules for various profiles. So Sam can use his frying pan. Lurs can shrug off wounds. Isildur can potentially wield the shards of Narsil.
Predicting Sam Bash with his frying pan. That's what that's gonna be.
Yeah, so like
Just
instead
in
of
his profile.
it replaces the special strike, I guess, in that case.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like this rule. What I like about this one is that I think there are some hero profiles, like especially in the mid-tier region, that sometimes can feel a bit samey. So I think it would be cool if they were made a little bit more unique. Like right now, of course, some of the bigger heroes that, have, one of a kind special rule is really cool. But then like for instance, like, you know, something like someone like Rutabi, like after a while when they start tacking on a 3+4+ master battle on random heroes, it's like she's really good, but she doesn't necessarily feel too special. It's just like she's good and she's in a good legion, right? So I think it would just be cool to have heroes be made more unique, that they have like a one of a kind ability.
Just to be a little bit of a devil's advocate, I kind of want to reserve judgment until we see some of those rules because in this current edition, we got a whole bunch of rules and some I haven't even seen once since the new edition. So, for example, like the Torio Keeley rule, where like she gains a strength, loses a defense if he dies. There's like the Eowyn and Eomer have a rule if Theoden dies, they get a buff. Like I might have seen that once. It could be really niche and also maybe like keyword dependent. I could see them giving heroes hatred and stuff that's not maybe not like won't come into play that much. So I don't know if it's going to be worth the trade-off for these restrictions, but we'll have to
Oh
see, right?
no, I think we're trying to move on from the restrictions. That has been agreed that that's not a good thing in our books. We prefer more choice, more freedom. I think when it comes to unique profiles, I personally just don't mind it, even if they are not all viable. Like I do like the A1 special rule. Like I even like the Grima making Theoden weak. It's only literally come up once when I think when I played Ian this one time, and then it actually mattered. It might have been someone else, but they were playing Defenders of Helm's Deep, and it was sick because their Theoden was like almost useless.
It's definitely cool. It just doesn't happen all that much. So maybe we'll get some that you can use like as an ability, kind of like Sam's frying pan. I think that would probably come up more if it doesn't require like another specific hero for it to trigger. We have a little bit more good news here. The wording will be updated to the rules to fit in with a new edition to make them clearer for players to understand. So hopefully we won't need as many FAQs for wording. Arguments for uh, rules as written or rules as intended.
They need to take a page out of Magic the Gathering's book. I think they have started a little bit with like the keywords and stuff, but just how they phrase uh special rules and like these unique rules, if they phrase them all like exactly the same thing, one FAQ could like eliminate a bunch of problems because whenever they say this phrase, it just works this way.
Yeah,
Orc captain doesn't mean orc captain.
Yeah.
It's not bolded. There's no comma after captain.
How about the Easterling horse? Is it an Easterling?
Yeah. So the next change we have is distribution of fight values. So currently there are a lot of models in the fight 3 to 6 range, making it quite congested. So even though they've confirmed that the fight value will still cap at 10, they're going to be spreading it a little bit. So some models will have their fight value bumped up so that the higher fight values are used more.
This is a great change. I think we've talked about it in the past before. People have talked about raising the cap, but even if they're not doing that, there's not a lot of fight 8, fight 9 heroes. So like, spread the heroes out a little bit more. And then also the warriors with all the slow power creep, like fight 4 meta became fight 5 meta. Like it's just kind of boring, right? Having a more like rock, paper, scissors system where there's fight 1 warriors, fight 2 warriors, and then, all the way up to 5 or 6, like I think would make things more interesting.
Fight 7, well, to 7+, not really used in the game. Like a couple models have them. So I still think like fight 9, fight 10 should be reserved for like the really big baddies and stuff like that. But yeah, throwing in like boosting up those big characters to fight 7, fight 8, that I don't think that's an issue, and a lot of those people who've been complaining about the fight 5 guys for forever, sure, they can go to 6 if a bunch of things get scaled up too. That makes sense. I'm curious to see where basic elves land, if they still stay as fight 5 and then the elites is fight 6, or if the elites go to fight 7. That'd be interesting. I don't know. Because they're kind of like the benchmark for like upper tier fight right now. I'm curious if they stay the same and everybody else comes up.
They're rebalancing everything, right? So as long as they're properly pointed, I think you want to leave them like as the only warriors at like fight 5, fight 6, totally okay. But then make them actually elite, right? And then maybe bump them up a point or two, and then have them be the most expensive warriors with like 1 attack.
The biggest question I have is whether Heroic Strike will be changed. Because if you're bumping up everyone's fight value, all of a sudden D6 more fight becomes way more consistent. So wonder if it's going to change to D3 or they're just going to keep it, make it better. So there'll also be a new stat line characteristic called intelligence, and it will work similar to courage. In the current edition, courage is used to make tests that feel a little bit odd, such as seeing if a model can see a ring bearer. So in the new edition, these sorts of tests will be using the intelligence characteristic instead. So a new stat to the stat line.
So they didn't give too much away there. The one example they gave doesn't have any impact at all. But in my mind, I'm like, this has so much potential. One of the biggest ones, my biggest hope, I don't know if it'll happen, and I've heard a lot of people complain about how much games, coming down to a roll off sucks, a heroic move off most of all. Of course, we also talk about like, as competitive players, don't leave it down to the one roll off. You probably made mistakes leading up to that, but still, like, it feels bad, right? Maybe intelligence could be part of that, where if you have a higher intelligence, you have some sort of advantage in a move off. I don't know, something that puts a little bit more control and decision making into the gameplay, how you create your list, which heroes to pick. And you actually have to pick it, because if they're adding this extra like stat line and the only thing is it does these really like niche things, I don't know if it'll be worth it. Like spotting ring bearers, like, are you really going to look at that stat? Courage is already like sometimes look to the wayside, right? For some profiles. So just don't want to add another like unnecessary stat.
We've talked about this in the past where roll-offs are frustrating, right? And it is sometimes you feel like you lose a roll-off and no matter how great of decisions you make in game, you're punished for it. So I think that would be a cool idea. Last week we talked about one of the reveals in Rise of Angmar where it talked about Hill Troll's intelligence. I wonder if that has any relation to like the intelligence in their stat line.
I think so, because we'll get to it later, but they're going to have a new edition profile. So
If every model in the game has an intelligence stat, which is what the hill troll thing implies. It's not just heroes, it's going to be every unit. What if, in a heroic move, for example, units will only listen to heroes like intelligence characteristic will only apply to other units that have the same or lower than them.
Oh
So if
shit,
someone's smarter than them, they won't listen.
that's that's actually pretty big brain because then heroes with high intelligence is good, and then warriors with bad intelligence is good, which kind of makes sense in real
Yeah.
life. You want the dumb soldiers.
Oh, dude.
A lot of
Dude.
good. That's a lot of good potential to like strategy with heroic actions.
I just thought about that right now, but that would be so interesting. We'll see what they do with it.
I hope it has a really interesting application and it's not something that's just like ignored when it comes out like a heroic challenge. Like it actually has an impact. All right. So the next bit basically is about how the profiles are going to be split. So as we discussed last week, there will be one book for Armies of the Lord of the Rings and Armies of the Hobbit. So they've clarified that these two books will be movie profiles only, because there will be a third book called Armies of Middle Earth, which will be profiles from the books. So this is super interesting. I don't know if it's like a rights reason or page limit reason, but in the current edition, they've mixed book and movie characters in these two army books. But now they're doing a third book, which is coming shortly after the release of the first two. So Armies of Middle Earth is going to come a little bit later after.
I mean, I guess they have more profiles if they count all the supplements that we added. And hopefully, I mean, this is just me, being optimistic, but hopefully, because it's for the War of the Rohirrim, right? We get new profiles for that too. So then add it in, maybe it's a significant amount. I mean, I hope that's the reason that we have more books and not just because they can print another book.
I'm gonna predict it's gonna be the three of them are all gonna be roughly the same size, and they're all gonna be about the size of the current Hobbit like profiles book. So not like the Lord of the Rings profiles book is like, I don't know, that big, and then like the Hobbit one is like smaller, and then like the source books are like small. So I think it'll probably be three, yeah, the roughly the size of the Hobbit book.
They know that the hardcore tournament players will want to own them all anyway. So it's like, oh, now everyone needs three books. My question here mostly is just there are a number of armies where it's mixed. There are some profiles from the movies and some not. I guess if they're not splitting them into armies and it's more about profiles, then this makes sense. It just it would take some time to get used to. Like if you have, let's say, Gandalf the White and Elessar in Armies of the Lord of the Rings because they're in the movie, but then like Baragon, you have to go to the Armies of Middle Earth to look up because he wasn't in the movies.
Yeah. And then are they in the same list or are they in separate lists?
They might just do kind of, I guess, what they did with this edition too, right? So either there's a few overlaps like Rivendell, which is in both books, or I guess they could just list out like what is available in that list, but doesn't show the profile.
Mhm.
So in this army, you'll give a list of the models that you can take. I mean, kind of like in the beginning of every army, it's not like they show the orc profile under Angmar, Mordor, and whatever, right? They basically they show like one, and then they'll say, and the other armies, it has a full comprehensive list of what can be taken. So it might do something like that. I guess it might be a little bit much for some people. I know I heard some complaints about this, but at the end of the day, I think after 6 years, a couple new books is not horrible. I mean, it's fine. The next part is going to be very, very controversial. The
Yeah.
fourth book, which is free.
So
Ooh.
what Richard just brought up is the legacies of Middle Earth. So the older profiles are going to be retired. So it's going to be a PDF, not a book you have to buy. So you can download it for free, and it's going to include profiles that will not be legal for official Games Workshop events, but you're allowed to play in your own independent tournaments and at home.
There's a consensus, basically. I haven't seen one person who is too excited about this because as a game system, we're already like always dying for new material, new profiles and stuff, and you're retiring them. I don't think we have too much bloat.
I hope that this is just going to be things that have like duplicate profiles. Like, do we need 3 Thorin profiles? Probably not. So maybe they'll relegate like 1 or 2 of them and they'll just keep one in the main rule book. Okay, sure. They kind of did that in this most recent like edition anyway. Like they cut down things and they just reduced things into one profile and got rid of some other things. If it's just like that, then sure, whatever. If it's like, on the other extreme end that I've heard some people say, where it's like, oh, they haven't produced Khand in a while, so now Khand, the whole faction is just going into this. Like that's too much. That's crazy. I don't even own that army, and I'm upset about it.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of speculation here. I've also heard some people say they're going to put all the unfun models in there. So Bombadil, Smog, maybe Shade. It's a little bit of a random assortment. Personally, I think it might have a little bit to do with just models that they want to keep selling. So they've done this for other games in Games Workshop's catalog. So like they've done it for Warhammer Fantasy 40K and stuff. And I could see them having models that are always only on made to order. They kind of want to advertise this game as like there's a model for every profile, right? So like for example, if they're not planning on making a Wardrake profile, I can see them throwing it in here. If they don't want to sell Orc Trackers anymore because they're super old models and they don't want to remake it in Forge World, maybe they throw them in there so that they don't have to sell them anymore. I can see them using this as like the way to do it. I don't think it's great for the game. Fortunately, at least in North America, we hardly have any Games Workshop sponsored events, so this doesn't seem to affect North America as much.
Yeah, yeah. I think it will really come down to what kind of profiles are in there. Like Ian said, if it's sweeping factions, that would be terrible. But then I can see most TOs around the world just saying like, yeah, we're gonna play this for all tournaments. But if it is like more of the Bombadil Smog types, that I get it. It's kind of like a soft ban list, which happens in a lot of tournaments anyway. Then we would abide by that list. But it is a bit scary, right? I have heard a lot of these like 40K, other game system players that you mentioned, Charles, that they've made this change to, and they've stated that that was one of the reasons, one of the chief reasons that they left those game systems, right? So we're a bit more experienced and we're like invested in the game, so we all have multiple armies. But if you imagine if you only have 1 or 2 armies and one of those or 2 of them gets retired, that's a huge incentive to just not continue playing.
Yeah. So the next piece of news is that the current Middle Earth supplements confirmed will not be valid in the new edition. I mean, this is not surprising because earlier we learned that, every profile will get reworked, every model seems to be getting an intelligence stat for intelligence. So like, of course, these profiles wouldn't be usable in the new edition. Makes sense.
It says all previous Middle Earth supplements. That includes the matched play guide. Are all the new rules for matched play just going to be in the core rule books, like all 18 scenarios?
I would think so.
Are we going to get like a new scenario book coming out? Are they going to cut down some of them?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, I would hope there's at least a small refresh of something new to do with the scenarios, right? Even if it's a couple being swapped out or just a change of some rules with some of the more problematic ones.
An update for Rise of Angmar. So basically, it's saying that it's confirmed to be coming out before the new edition, and that it will only be valid for match play up until the new edition. So the profiles will be structured as the current edition. and the designers are aware of the short shelf life. So there will be down here, it says there will be a PDF for the profiles to download when the new edition comes out.
Mhm.
So that's kind of nice, but it's unfortunate that it's not going to be valid for very long. And I've seen people talk on Discord today that they probably won't buy it.
You can't blame the Games Workshop team for this. Like it clearly shows that like we had a 2 year break that, you know, it was meant to come out earlier to spread it out more before the new edition, but probably logistic wise, it just wasn't possible. This is where, like, you know, I said at first, I really think Games Workshop did a great job, like being transparent here. Give props when it's
Mhm.
due, that they didn't have to tell us that it had a limited shelf life and stuff. It being this, they know that they're actually going to lose probably some sales. So, you know, it builds a little bit of goodwill here.
It's disappointing knowing that, you know, if this came out like a year ago, you
Mhm.
wouldn't have as much like downtime in the meta. Just think about the past year. If that was all like Angmar and Arnor stuff, the game would be so different.
I mean, yeah, but I don't know, it didn't. So it does suck, and I also wish it came out earlier, but it is what it is, right? It is interesting though, right? Like they're saying it's gonna be valid for a couple months. The new book, that what the movie's coming out in December, so they're gonna want the new rules manual out. I don't know, maybe at least for the movie launch, right? So maybe first week of December. They haven't given a release date for this yet, so let's give it a couple weeks. You're right. We're in the middle of August right now, so it's not going to come out till maybe September. So what's that, like 3 months, maybe 2 months
Yeah.
that this book's going to be valid? Like, yikes! But it is good. Again, like Richard said, transparency, a little bit of goodwill to bring the people back on their side. But yeah, I think this is probably, like a lot of people speculated, it wasn't up to the game designers. It was some kind of higher up scheduling conflict or something.
Yeah.
So, Birder is not in the books or the movies, right? And they came out with a new model. There's no way they axe him to Legacy right after coming out with a new model, right?
Saw a great meme about that earlier. What was it? Those fires that burn the brightest die twice as fast. R.I.P. Birder and his legendary legion.
Uh,
And then lastly, confirmed there will be no August FAQ, which is understandable if there's a new edition on the horizon. I think this also confirms that the new edition for sure will come out before the next FAQ.
Because it says back on track in February for it. So that, like, the new edition, it's coming out then. And presumably, yeah, they want 2 or 3 months of stuff happening beforehand to make it even worth it for them to release an FAQ, right?
yeah. So it's definitely going to be this year.
Yeah.
So after going through all of these announcements, overall thoughts?
I think I'm still excited, but I'm a little bit more scared than last week.
Yeah. I was pumped last week. Absolutely pumped. You know, the sky isn't falling, but I am dialing it back down to, I'm excited because different things are happening. I don't necessarily think I'm like looking forward to it like a lot as much as I was before. You know, maybe once we get more details, then that'll come back up. But I don't know. I hope these are like the biggest changes, and they're all just like, ah, here's the big changes, and then the rest will be calm. I really hope that this isn't like here's some big changes, and then 2 weeks from now they're like, oh, here's some even bigger stuff.
Yeah.
That would suck. Like, who knows? It's a lot of speculation right now. Like we don't know anything really.
But even if these are the only changes, that's still a lot. I'm a little bit worried and just at them streamlining the rules, the special strikes. I know that's only probably a small part of the game, but also just the list building aspect, losing a lot of options there. But I'm not as excited as I was last week, just like you guys.
Yeah. Should have said this earlier. I don't understand the whole streamlining argument. If they wanted to do that, they wouldn't be adding an entire extra characteristic to every freaking profile. That's not streamlining, my dude.
These have been our thoughts on the new edition announcement. We want to hear from our viewers. What do you think of these introductions to changes that are going to be applied in the new edition? Are you excited for them? And which ones are you worried about? Let us know in the comments. Thank you all for watching and look forward to the next episode of Into the West.